مساء الخير مشاهدي سكاي نيوز عربية متابعي بصراحة إلى هذه الحلقة الجديدة التي نستضيف فيها اليوم سيد توماس فريدمان. توماس فريدمان اسم يعرفه الشرق الأوسط جيدا كما يعرف هو هذا الشرق وشعبه، فكتب عنه بدون ملل مقالات ومقالات في نيويورك تايمز، وعاش في أزقته في بيروت وجال عواصمه مضطربة كانت أم مزدهرة. صحفي يتقن قراءة التطورات ويمتع القارئ والمستمع كذلك بكتاباته عن ما وراء هذه التطورات وعن قرارات أمريكا وخطواتها والغرب تجاه شرقنا وتجاه العالم بشكل عام. يشرفني اليوم أن أستضيف السيد توماس فريدمان الكاتب في نيويورك تايمز، طبعا المثقف والمفكر، في هذه الحلقة من بصراحة. أهلا وسهلا فيك سيد فريدمان.
أهلا فيك.
سيد فريدمان، أولا لابد أن أسألك عن شرق الأوسط. أنت تقول بأن هذا الشرق هو الشرق الأوسط الجديد، يعني لا تنتظره، قد جاء وهو هنا. ما هي هذه الملامح؟ وهل هناك بالفعل إدراك غير منك كمثقفين كنخبة فكرية من قبل أمريكا والغرب لهذه الطبيعة الجديدة للشرق الأوسط الجغرافية والسياسية؟
Well, you know, we're in something of a new Sykes-Picot moment 100 years after Sykes-Picot. And I see kind of four models out there right now. One I call the one state. Israel, Palestine, we're in the age of the one state solution. Mafi's two states. Rach, it's over, okay? The non-state, we have non-state actors now all over the place. In your country, Syria, in Sinai, in Lebanon. We have non-state actors, Hezbollah, organizations like that, Hamas. We have no state, that's ISIS, and that is no one's in charge in these areas, basically. And we have the kind of rogue state of Iran, you know, moving all over the place. So we have we're in the Middle East of the one state, the non-state, the no state, and the rogue state. And I think those are the factors that will really shape the future. So we're seeing what I call the Sykes-Picot version, only this is bottom up rather than top down. You know, Sykes-Picot was colonial powers imposing from the top down. This is a Middle East reshaping itself from the bottom up.
ولكن هل هذه الأشكال هل هي قابلة للحياة؟ هل هي قابلة لأن تبقى أم هو واقع مثل نوع من مخاض؟ هذا الشرق يعبر عن نفسه مثل ما أنت تقول من الأسفل، بمعنى أنه هي مرحلة ولكن لا يمكن لها أن تكون هي المرحلة التي تستقر عندها الأمور.
Well, let's talk about divide the region for a second. Let's leave the Arab-Israel thing over there for a second, the one-state solution. Let's talk about the Arab Middle East. I think that if ISIS didn't exist right now, if ISIS weren't there, we would be in what I call Arab Spring 2, okay? Because what I feel traveling around is a deep frustration among average people with the corruption, the misgovernance, the iron-fisted crackdowns that are happening as if the first Arab Spring didn't happen at all. Because when oil prices were $100, okay, you steal some, there's enough that came down that it was okay. But when oil prices come down, when you tell me I'm not going to get paid my full salary for 6 months, then I want to know, wait a minute, where's the money? Where's the governance? And so if ISIS weren't there, where all these leaders are basically saying to their people, it's either me or ISIS, okay? And by the way, the Americans are saying the same thing. We'd rather have you than ISIS. So the people are kind of being left out of this now. But I would say to all the leaders, beware. There is something brewing down there that people are very, very unhappy. And there's a feeling like they're just going back to the old game, you know. And that's what I'm feeling. And I'm very struck how different I feel now than just 2 years ago.
تحدثت كيف تتعامل أمريكا مع الأنظمة الموجودة، كيف اليوم تقول لك طيب هي نفس المعادلة، الأمن أفضل من الحرية، أي نوع من الحرية، حرية شخصية أو حرية التعبير بشكل العريض. قرأنا عقيدة أوباما التي نشرت. ما رأيك بما قرأت؟ هل بالفعل عدم تدخل أوباما في تحديدا في سوريا كمثل كنموذج بالفعل أثر على إطالة أمد هذه المشكلة، على جعل داعش بهذه القوة التي هو فيها؟ هل تنصحه كمفكر استراتيجي بأن يتم تغير هذه الاستراتيجية الأمريكية؟
So it's a good question, Zena. You know, I've been thinking about it a lot, and we've had a lot of presidential debates, you know, in our election season, and but people like me don't get to ask questions because they only have TV people who ask questions. So I'm not a TV person. But if I did get to ask a question, if I got to ask each presidential candidate one question about foreign policy, what would it be? And my question would be, are you lucky? Are you lucky? That's all I want to know. Because President Obama has been very lucky. Now let me explain why. So as you said in your question, he's had a very cautious approach to Syria. No troops on the ground at all. Even with ISIS, it was just special forces, very limited. And we're going to gradually shrink ISIS down. So far, so good, okay? But we just had a report the other day that ISIS had used mustard gas in an operation against Kurdish troops early on in August. ISIS, to me, is an organization. Zain, I'm 62. I'm an old man. And I've actually covered every Middle East war on the ground since 1979, except one, this one. Because I can't go to Mosul. You can't go. It's so dangerous. They have a department for chopping off journalists' heads. So you know what that leaves me? It leaves me very humble. It leaves me saying, I don't really know what's going on there. I just know one thing. ISIS, they are wicked and wickedly smart. Wicked and wickedly smart. And they have been able to recruit people from a distance that I've never seen before, including a couple in San Bernardino, California. Exactly. So right now, Obama's strategy, very slow, gradual. We're squeezing ISIS at our pace, okay? And right now, it's all going, sort of fine. It's all going in the right direction, you could say.
In containing it.
Right, in containing, exactly. But what if we wake up one morning and discover that ISIS has a suitcase bomb with some kind of fissile material, some kind of poison gas, and they let it out, and God forbid, in Europe, in an Arab capital, in the United States. Right now, Obama's very lucky. See, it all looks like his strategy is working. But if that happens, okay, suddenly people are going to say, this is what the Obama doctrine brought us. Okay, that's one bomb. One is the ISIS bomb he has to worry about. It's a ticking time bomb. You don't know when it's going to go off. And by the way, ISIS gets more dangerous the more you shrink them down. Because the more they see the end coming, the more crazy they will get. So that's the most dangerous moment, is when they're about to lose. He's got another bomb called the refugee bomb. Again, Obama said, Syria, no troops on the ground. We're going to work with Putin and peace process. But meanwhile, we have millions of refugees that have spilled into Lebanon, into Jordan, into Turkey, and to Kurdistan, and to Iraq even. But most of all, from an American point of view, they're spilling into Europe. And what are they doing? They're fracturing the European Union. Now, the European Union is a strategic issue for us. The health and viability of the European Union. The refugees in the Middle East is a humanitarian issue. The European Union is the other United States in the world. They are the United States of Europe. They are the other center of democratic capitalism. If they fracture because of the refugee issue, because Obama said, no troops on the ground, because the Obama doctrine said, no troops on the ground, how is he going to look? So that's why I began that's why my question, I would say of Obama, please make my president lucky. Please make sure that the refugee bomb doesn't go off and blow up Europe, and the ISIS bomb doesn't blow up an Arab capital or an American one or a European one. So the Obama doctrine looks great today, but what I say is be careful, be humble, because this doctrine, a year from now, could look like it paved the way for an ISIS weapon of mass destruction and for the blowing up of the EU. So me, if I were Obama, I wouldn't be declaring any doctrines. This is a region that makes you cry if you declare a doctrine, okay?
Wow.
And so I'd be very, very careful. So that's why I just want to know of the other candidates, are you going to be as lucky as Obama? If you are, you might get my vote, okay? But be aware, he's been smart on some things, he's been lucky.
حسب ما قرأنا بهذا اللقاء الذي سمي عقيدة أوباما بأنه سأل سؤال واحد. طيب إذا أنا اليوم ضربت تدخلت عسكريا على النظام السوري لن يسقط، سيخرج ويقول أنا موجود، وبالتالي سيكون تحدي لكبرياء أمريكا أو نفوذ أمريكا الذي أنتم تطلبون مني أن أحافظ عليه. ماذا بعد؟ ما هي الخطة الأخرى، الخطوة القادمة؟ وعندما لم يحصل على جواب قرر أنه عدم التدخل هو الأفضل.
Yes, a very good question. I should tell you that I've actually supported the president in his caution, okay? But I've done it very humbly. I think we have two terrible options because we know what's happened by not going in heavy, okay? But we don't know what happens if we do go in heavy, you know?
In Syria, but you know in other places.
Exactly, and we've had the experience here, in Iraq,
في مكان
exactly.
أخرى.
I'm not actually critical of Obama. In fact, just the opposite. I'm only critical of boasting. Okay. I think this is the worst time in my lifetime to do foreign policy, okay?
Wow.
Because all of Obama's predecessors, their big problem was managing strength. The strength of China, the strength of the Soviet Union, the strength of Iraq, okay? Obama is the first American president whose main challenge is to manage weakness. And managing weakness is so much more difficult than managing strength because everything comes apart in your hands, and everyone you call, they pick up the phone and the phone comes off the wall, okay? Wow. So therefore, when you are the only source of strength, if you put your foot in somewhere, you can sink right in. Why do you think Putin was so eager to get out of Syria? Because he understood that. He's read Russian history in Afghanistan. He was part of that story. And so Obama is the first president whose main challenge is managing weakness. And for that I have enormous sympathy.
تسمح لي وقف معه فاصل قصير نتابع بعده هذا الحوار. فاصل مشاهدينا لحظات ونعود إليكم. بصراحة يتحاور مع توماس فريدمان.
And my grandmother always used to say, Grandma Friedman used to say, Tom, never destabilize a country that spans 9 time zones. It was just a little something Grandma used to say.
Okay. أهلا بكم من جديد إلى هذه الحلقة. نتحدث إلى كاتب النيويورك تايمز المفكر والمثقف توماس فريدمان، طبعا عن وضعنا وعن الشرق الأوسط. أهلا وسهلا بك من جديد سيد فريدمان. تحدثت عن سوريا، أريد أن أفهم نظرتك للتدخل الروسي العسكري المفاجئ، للانسحاب الروسي المفاجئ. هل هو اتفاق روسي أمريكي، يعني هي بعملية اتفاق، أم هي هروب روسي بشكل أو بآخر؟ هل هو دعم للنظام الأسد؟ هل هو العصا لنظام الأسد؟ من يضعف ومن يقوي؟
You know, I don't know. I'm asking myself the same question. It's too early to tell. It really is too early to tell.
Okay.
It will manifest itself in the negotiations or on the ground. You know, in the Middle East, there are two sort of ruling doctrines that repeat themselves over and over, okay? One is, I'm strong, why should I compromise? I'm weak, how can I compromise? So you have these regimes, you know, going, you know, so I ask myself, is Assad not saying, before I was weak, how can I compromise? And now I'm strong. Why should I compromise? Or there is another doctrine. We see it rarely, but we saw it in Ta'if in ending the Lebanese civil war, and we saw it in Tunisia. And that doctrine is no victor, no vanquished. We are going to share power, and the minority will be overrepresented. In Lebanon's case, it was the Christians, who were about 30% of the population, but they got half the seats in the parliament. So I look at Syria today and I say, which doctrine is playing out? Is it, I'm weak, how can I compromise? I'm strong now, why should I compromise? Or is it, you know what? No victor, no vanquished. Let's find a way to share power. I don't know.
هل القرار السوري، أكيد هو ليس سوري، ولكن ما هو حجم القرار السوري بإنهاء الأزمة السورية؟ بمعنى هل ممكن اليوم إذا قرر السوريين بأي دكترين أنت حكيت أن يتوصلوا إلى اتفاق، ممكن أم هي الدول بالفعل 90% تلعب اليوم قرار بالتوصل إلى اتفاق سياسي في سوريا؟
You know, let me take your question to 30,000 feet, if I could, because to me, the most important peace process that has to happen in this region and can only emerge from leaders in this region is the peace process between Sunni and Shia. And until that peace process happens, until there's a macro decision that we are not going to keep fighting, that we're going to find a way to live together, none of this matters, because these are all details that, because one side or the other will always be trying to take advantage. All I know is right now that civil war, which has been going on since the 7th century, on and off at different times, now it's killing the Arab world. It literally is killing the Muslim world, because the rest of the world is moving on. I mean, they are moving on, as I been speaking about here. And they're not going to wait. And so, I think until there is at least a truce, if not a real theological understanding, how can Syria hold?
الاتفاق حول البرنامج النووي الإيراني أثار الكثير من حفيظة الحلفاء التقليديين لأمريكا، تحديدا المملكة العربية السعودية، ويبدو أنه وضع الزيت على النار في هذا المحور الذي تحدثت عنه، أو هذا التضاد. هل ترى بأن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية كان يمكن أن تقدم بعض التطمينات لحلفاء التقليديين السنة السعودية تحديدا من هذا الاتفاق، بأنه سوف يؤدي إلى إيران أفضل، أكثر تعاونا، أقل تدخلا عسكريا في مناطقهم، في مناطق نفوذهم؟ أنت قلت أنه هذا الاتفاق سيكون تبعاته أخطر حتى من تدخل الأمريكي في أفغانستان، حذرت بشدة بأنه سيكون له انعكاسات خطيرة.
So, I think the question the president is asking when people say, are you guaranteeing your allies, is who are you? Okay, we couldn't ask that question before. We just cared, are you with us or against us? Now that's a question we didn't ask 10 years ago for two reasons. There was a Cold War, okay, we needed Saudi Arabia's support in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and we were an oil importer, okay? But now we're the biggest, or about to become the biggest oil producer in the world, okay? And there's no Cold War. So what you're seeing from Obama is not just Obama. Don't just think this is about this black guy who became president. This is deeply structural, okay? And at the same time, it is fair to say, for someone in Saudi Arabia to say to me, well, which Iran does he think he's dealing with? The Iran that blew up the Marine barracks in Lebanon, the Iran that was probably behind the U.S. Embassy bombing, the Iran that was behind Khobar Towers, the Iran that attempted to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in Washington? Which Iran are you dealing with? What he would say, I think, excuse me, I just got Iran to put its nuclear bomb on the shelf for 10 years. Has anybody else in the world done that for you? Okay? I've actually bought you 10 years of breathing space to now get your act together, okay, and forge a different relationship with them. At the same time, though, I said one state, non-state, no state, and rogue state. So I'm not at all happy with what Iran is doing in Damascus, in Sana'a, in Baghdad, and Beirut. you know. So they are pushing, you know, their proxies in a way that is really unhealthy. You know, I lived in Lebanon. I have many friends there. It's a country I care deeply about, you know. And it's not all Hezbollah's fault, but Hezbollah is not acting like a Lebanese party. It's acting like a mercenary force for the government and Revolutionary Guard in Tehran. I understood Hezbollah emerged to protect Lebanese from Israel. I understand the logic of that, and to represent Shiite interests in Lebanon. And you know, I totally understand that. But when they become a mercenary army, they put Lebanon's future behind Iran's future. I think that's just really bad. And so I understand how people feel. I think the president probably could have framed it in a different way. But the fact that he didn't tells you, and the fact that he didn't, and no one in America cared at all, by the way, tells you where America is right now. Okay. So you can agree with it or disagree with it.
بغض النظر من يأتي بعد أوباما تقول لي جمهوري أو ديمقراطي أو أي شيء.
Doesn't matter. Hillary, Trump would even be worse, and Hillary would be the same thing.
دائما عندي فضول هذا الانفتاح الأمريكي على إيران كيف بغض النظر عن باقي الدول كيف سيكون تأثيره على إيران؟ الشعب الإيراني ماذا يريد؟
I think we're just at the beginning. We saw they just had elections, parliamentary elections, and the conservatives did very badly, the hardliners did badly, and Rouhani's allies did very well. So it tells you what's underneath. You know, I always said, you know, Rouhani and Zarif were not negotiating with, they weren't in Vienna to negotiate with Kerry for tourism. Okay, that is, they understood where their people were, and the supreme leader understood where their people were. He had to have this negotiation. He had to do this deal.
الثورة الخضراء اللي صارت في إيران ربما كانت
That
دليل.
tells you what's underneath the revolution. Exactly. So I think Obama's made a bet, okay, on Iran. And the bet is that in 10 years, these global forces will force a change in the regime, because ultimately the only security for the Arab world or Israel or Turkey vis-a-vis Iran is a change of regime, okay? We can keep the technology away from them for 10 years or whatever, but they're eventually going to get the nuclear technology. What matters is who's in charge, you know? And so I think, and you want it to evolve, not revolve, you know, because you don't want the place to blow up. But I think it's a legitimate bet. I'm not going to say it's a good bet. It's not a sure thing, but I think that in the world we're going into, you know, that there's a lot of young people there who want to be part of the world.
روسيا شريك محتمل للولايات المتحدة، منافس، فري رايدر مثل ما بيقول أوباما، الراكبون بالعربي وكيف بدنا نترجمها الراكبون بالمجان يعني.
I look at Putin and I see a man who is a leader who is fighting Mother Nature, human nature, and Moore's Law all at the same time. What do I mean? First of all, he's fighting Mother Nature. He's bet his whole future, his country's whole future, on oil and gas being extracted from the ground at a time of rising climate change, which if we actually do burn all that oil and gas, we are going to end up as a bad biological experiment, okay? The human race isn't going to survive. He's fighting human nature. The people of Ukraine, they want to be part of the European Union. They don't want to be part of some crazy Moscow economic, there's no Disney World in Leningrad. They want to be part of the European Union. And he's fighting Moore's Law, that the power of microchips will keep doubling because they're connected. They're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, they're on WhatsApp, they're on Instagram, they're seeing the world. So to me, Putin's fighting all three of those things. And what's the tragedy of it, Zena, is that he has a very talented people. Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, is a Russian. You know, the founder, inventor of television is a Russian. The Tchaikovsky, and this is a talented people. But instead of betting on his people and trying to elevate them He's betting on oil and gas. And he's a man who's always looking for dignity in all the wrong places. He's looking for dignity in Crimea. So what? So you grab this miserable island on the Black Sea. Good for you. Sartain. Go ahead, you got it. Big deal, okay? It's like a sugar high. He's always trying to distract his people with a shiny object. Look at Crimea. Don't look at me. I'm actually stealing everything. Look at Crimea. Look at Ukraine. Look at me in Syria. But meanwhile, Russia's economy is going to shrink probably another 5% this year. And more people will die there drinking vodka than anywhere in the world. So,
Seriously?
I mean, oh yeah, not even close. So, people say he's a tough guy, and if only we had a president who took his shirt off and rode bareback on horses, and whatnot. And he's a tough guy until he isn't, until the laws of gravity really start to impact that place. And I will tell you, Zane, I don't want to see Russia destabilized. I would like to work. I was actually the leading opponent in America, the leading opponent of NATO expansion, because I didn't want to be aggressively moving in his face. And my grandmother always used to say, Grandma Friedman used to say, Tom, never destabilize a country that spans 9 time zones. It was just a little something Grandma used to say.
Okay.
I'm only kidding,
You've
but I
got
don't.
a very smart grandma.
She was a geostrategist grandma.
A very
okay?
geostrategical.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So I don't want to destabilize a country that spans 9 time zones. I want Russia to be a partner. But Putin one day is a partner and one day not. And that's because he can't figure out who he is, where he's going, and most of all, he doesn't trust his people. And he doesn't trust his ability to really deliver for his people. Because if he did, he would be not drilling the ground. He'd be drilling his people, unlocking their creativity and talent and entrepreneurship, men and women. And that's what he's not doing.
فاصل قصير لو سمحت، نعود لمتابعة هذا الحوار. مشاهدينا، فاصل قصير. توماس فريدمان صعب يشبع الإنسان، فكر الإنسان أيضا من أفكارك. لحظات ونعود إليكم.
Do not mess with Mother Nature. And people here are messing with Mother Nature. We have a dam in Mosul that could absolutely crack at any point. And when it does, it will wash away probably 100,000 people if that dam breaks.
أهلا بكم من جديد مشاهدينا إلى هذا الحوار مع سيد توماس فريدمان، الذي طبعا غني عن تعريف، كاتب المقال، المفكر والمؤلف في نيويورك تايمز. سيد فريدمان، عندما تقول أنه الشرق الأوسط الجديد خلص انتهى وهناك يعني دويلات من النوع جديد أو دول من نوع جديد سميت حضرتك في بداية هذه المقابلة، هل أفهم منك أنه الدولة الوطنية انتهت في الشرق الأوسط؟ وإذا هيك كان، هذا التفكك بأي شكل؟ هل عم نحكي عن تفككات قومية، تفككات مذهبية؟ هل سيكون منظم، تفكك منظم، أم هو التمزق ومزيد من الصراعات لفترة معينة؟ يعني اليوم مشاهد لما بيسمعنا بيقول طب يعني كيف بده يطبق هيدا الفكرة على الأرض؟ شو رح يشوف؟ شو رح يصير ببلده؟
Well, I think that's the million-dollar question, which is, and it really goes back to those 2 models I said. Are the parties here going to relate to each other with, I'm strong, why should I compromise? I'm weak, how can I compromise? Or will they say, you know what, no victor, no vanquished? Now we saw Tunisia, after a little struggle and some violence, say, you know what, let's share power. Okay, now in that case it wasn't sectarian, it was a much more homogeneous population, but there was religious, secular, but those were the main contending forces, and they said, let's share power. In Syria and Iraq, we're not at that point. And you can, I hear everything. People say, they should be federal, they should be partition, there should be a mini state. I just know this. In the world that I also write about, the world of technology, globalization, innovation, the quality of your state is going to matter more than ever. The idea that a bunch of little states, each with their own currency, each with their own government, each with their own education system, can possibly compete in the world we're going into, when the world is getting not just flat but fast, is crazy. At the same time, the old systems of just one state where one minority ruled over a majority, that doesn't work either. So to me, the natural solution is some kind of federal system where we share the power, we share the wealth, we learn first to live apart so we can live again together. That to me is the natural solution. And if you said make a prediction about Syria or Iraq, I predict that is what they will come to. They will come to Taif as they came to in Lebanon. Unfortunately, Lebanon took 14 years. Okay.
والآن هي على شفير الانهيار الطائف، يعني ماذا بقي من تطبيق الطائف أصلا؟
Yeah.
يعني يبدو أنه هي منطقة تبتلع كل الاتفاقيات.
Ultimately, you know, people to survive are going to have to say, A, I'm tired, B, I'm exhausted, C, I can't get into Europe, and D, my kids aren't getting an education, you know. And so that's what happened in Lebanon. They basically got exhausted, and they came to some modus vivendi. I think that's what's going to happen in Syria. The idea of a Alawite state here and a Kurdish state there, and all of them fighting with each other, it will take all their money, all their resources. Maybe you could afford that in a world of $120 a barrel oil, but in a world of $20 a barrel oil, no one's going to pay for that.
بالطائف كان في شرطي حمى هذا الاتفاق.
Right, very good point, very good point. Who will be the policeman? That is what I think America's role should be. America with the European Union, with China, with the Arab League, with whoever. That Taif needed two things. It needed three things. It needed no victor, no vanquish by the parties. They had to come to that conclusion. The minority had to be overrepresented, so it would feel secure. Okay? And third, you needed a referee that everyone could go to if they were worried. That was Syria in the case of Lebanon. Obviously in the case of Syria as a whole now and Iraq, there's going to have to be some kind of referee as well, who that will be. And I think America will be very happy to play that role of referee, but not the role of policeman, you know, having to sit on and suppress the violence, you know. So I think that's where this will come eventually, because there's so many global forces that will push it in that direction. If it doesn't happen, by the way, you know, another thing I write about and I've written books about is climate change, biodiversity. Mother Nature is going to kill everybody here long before they kill each other. Okay?
I've read
right?
that.
Right. So
like, this is genius.
She will finish off the whole neighborhood because look, last summer we saw a heat index in the northern tip of the Persian Gulf of 161 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is in centigrade. All I can tell you is that it's too hot to live in. By the way, that heat index brought down the Iraqi government. Abadi had to fire his vice presidents because the air conditioning went off. So that's only going in one direction. My Kurdish friends tell me, growing up here, we never had sandstorms.
Right.
Now we have sandstorms all the time. The Syrian revolution is half a climate. There was a 4-year drought in the 4 years leading up to
the snow
and everything. The people had to leave their farms and herds and go to the cities, and that helped, you know, trigger the revolution. So Mother Nature, always remember with Mother Nature, she's just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You can't talk her up, you can't talk her down. You can't say, Mother Nature, I'm fighting the Shiites right now. Mother Nature, go deal with the Sunnis right now. Okay, she's just chemistry, biology, and physics, and she will do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And Mother Nature always bats last, to put it in American baseball terms. And she always bats 1,000. Do not mess with Mother Nature. And people here are messing with Mother Nature. We have a dam in Mosul that could absolutely crack at any point. And when it does, it will wash away probably 100,000 people if that dam breaks. That would be the end of agriculture in Iraq for a long, long time. Not to mention the lives of everyone living on the banks of the Tigris.
ويتم التعامل معه كأنه مسألة سياسية، يعني مناوشة سياسية.
Right.
بدون أي تقدير حقيقي
للمشكلة. There are Shiites in Baghdad who say, let it go, it'll just wash away Sunnis. This is so crazy. That's insane. As if Mother Nature will distinguish, oh, this, we'll go around the Shiite house, you know, and that's not going to happen.
تركيا سيد فريدمان، ما هو الدور الذي تلعبه؟ واضح أنه في مشكلة في تحديد تركيا دورها لنفسها بين الناتو، بين دخول الاتحاد الأوروبي، بين قوة إقليمية، بين قوة دينية مرجعية سنية في المنطقة. كيف تفهم تركيا؟
So I'm a big fan of Turkey in general. It's a country I like to visit. I have a lot of friends there. And I always hoped that the European Union would make Turkey a member, so that Turkey would be a bridge between Europe and the Muslim world and not a ditch. Unfortunately, they came to the Turks. They said, please fill in your application for our club. And they filled in the application. They changed a lot of their laws. They turned the application in. And the Europeans said, oh, nobody told you? We're a Christian club. Nobody told you. I'm so sorry. And that's really what produced the AKP. You know, a kind of, it wasn't all that produced, but it really pushed Turkey much more in that direction. And now you have a megalomaniac. A megalomaniac. I think one of the worst leaders in the world, Erdogan, who had a chance, again, he had a chance to be no victor, no vanquish.
Right.
To say to the Kurds of Turkey, 40% of the population, let's have a peace process, let's share power. And they wanted to do it.
Yep.
But because he was such a megalomaniac that he wanted to not only be a symbolic president, but ruler for life, you know, another sultan basically. And he lost the first election being nice to the PKK, nice to the Kurds of Turkey. So he said, no more Mr. Nice. Now I'll go to war with 40% of my population. Because had he forged an agreement with the Kurds of Turkey, he would have completely isolated the radicals, the PKK. When he went to war with the Kurds of Turkey, he fused all the Kurds together. And it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. This is a guy, Erdogan, who actually took his country economically. He was the Deng Xiaoping of Turkey. Had he retired 2 years ago after his prime minister term was up, said, thank you very much, I've taken my people, he would be remembered as a historic figure, like a Deng Xiaoping. But like everybody else in the neighborhood, they stay too long. They think they are the state. And he is taking Turkey to a very bad place.
حكيت أنت عن الفيدرالية بين بس فيدرالية تبع المشاركة بالسلطة وغيره، ولكن أنا أريد أن أسأل فكرة دخول الأمريكي في العراق، بس لا أرجع للقبل. كم حطمت هي الركائز اللي كانت موجودة عليها العراق؟ هل تتحمل أي مسؤولية؟ لأنه اليوم كله يرجع ويقول لك
I think the solution for Iraq, I have to be frank, is biology. Okay, what do I mean by that? So we had Saddam, and Saddam was like a batterer. He's like a wife beater, child beater. Okay, now ruling Iraq are the battered children. Battered children never make good parents. Okay, they just become batterers themselves. That's what happened with Maliki. He was a battered child who became a batterer. He treated his kids, his citizens, the way Saddam treated him. What we need is this generation to pass away, and hopefully a new generation, like the young people you meet here at the American University of Suleimani, you know, who aren't such wounded souls, aren't such battered children, might be able to find a way to live together. But right now, you know, I have a friend who says trust is the only legal performance enhancing drug. When there is trust in the room, if you and I trust each other, what we can write together will be amazing. If we don't trust each other, if we don't share, whatever we write, it will be less than 2. If we trust each other, what we write will add, 1 + 1 will add up to 3, maybe 4. If we don't trust each other, it'll add up to 1/2. So right now, what is missing in this whole part of the world is the essential ingredient for governance and innovation, and that is trust. Because if I don't have trust, if I think it's rule or die, that either my family, my tribe, my sect has to be in power or I'm dead, you know, then you can't govern. and you can't innovate anything. And the great miracle of the United States is that people from all over the world, all these different sects, religions, races, they come there, they shed that, the majority of them, and they become part of what we call e pluribus unum, out of many, one. We make one. And because we're a high trust nation, I can live anywhere. I can live in any state. I can run for office, whether I'm Ben Carson or Barack Obama, we have a lot of troubles in America right now, and we can talk about that. And we look like we're not getting along. But remember one thing: we have twice elected a black man whose middle name is Hussein, whose grandfather was a Muslim, who defeated a woman, Hillary Clinton, to run against a Mormon, Mitt Romney. Now, who does that? Okay, so that is. Do you realize the level of trust you have to have in a country? By the way, we elected this guy whose grandfather was a Muslim within a decade of 9/11. So that's pretty amazing. That's the secret of America.
What does America? أمريكا هل يمكن أن تنتخب ترامب؟
No, and unfortunately, the America that did that, which I thought was really amazing, that we had moved on. I think what we've learned is 30% of us, that's the Trump vote. Remember, Trump is getting 30% of the Republican primary vote. So that's, when you look at the whole country, that's not, but nevertheless, we have a minority that is really upset that we twice elected a black man whose middle name was Hussein, whose grandfather was a Muslim, who defeated a woman to run against a Mormon. And what we've discovered is how deep that is. For a lot of these people, Obama, their opposition to Obama is 80% about race. And the other 20% is about race.
What would happen? ماذا سيحدث لو تم انتخاب ترامب؟
I make no predictions. I'm in the prediction business, but I still have a lot of faith in my country and my countrymen that we will not elect someone who has insulted Muslims, who insults Hispanics, who insults women, and has not done an hour of homework preparation for the job of being President of the United States. I don't believe he's done 1 hour of reading about healthcare. What should my real position be? Nuclear proliferation. What should my weapon, my position be? So, I hope. But he's, in funny ways. We've those of us who cover the world. In just 2 years now, we've had 2 big surprises. One is ISIS. Out of nowhere, this movement comes and takes over large swaths of 2 states and has adherents all over the world, from San Bernardino to Karachi and Lahore. Out of nowhere. I was here 2 years ago. I gave the commencement at the American University, and a week later I left and ISIS happened. They took over Mosul. And believe me, no one here the week I was here had ever heard of ISIS, okay? Trump phenomena, same thing. Nafs ishi. Out of nowhere, this guy has taken over the Republican Party.
Thank you so much. شكرا لكم مشاهدينا على المتابعة. ألقاكم بصراحة الأسبوع المقبل. نلتقي.